these games take a really, really long time. And if you're looking at the Xbox model, which, as we heard from Sarah Bond yesterday, is doubling down on Game Pass and putting everything on Game Pass, that is pretty much the model that Phil wants to go with and make sure it succeeds. During those periods of those AAA games not coming yet, they need to fill it up with something. It's a subscription service at the end.
Right.
You know, you've got Netflix, you've got Hulu. The only way these sub services survive is through content. Now, even AA games are taking 5 to 7 years to make. I mean, look at Hellblade 2. Official development didn't start till 2001, but the actual pre-production with scripting and everything started 7 years ago. That's a long time, even for a AA game. These games are just taking too long. So the focus for Microsoft is try and switch to games that take 12 to 18 months to release to fill in those gaps. In my opinion, is primarily influenced by Game Pass and filling in those gaps where they need to. They don't want obviously just trash filler in there. They want the games to be good, but at the same time, games need to be coming out faster because the longer they take, the higher the risk of the potential of a studio closing. Because all it takes is one failed game that took 10, 15 years. Just look at Callisto Protocol, and
Game Pass isn't even 10 years old.
Hmm?
Game Pass isn't even 10 years old. So everything you're talking about here, if it takes you 10 years, that means that the game started before Game Pass even existed.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's the point.
Well, that's right? Where I think you're going to start seeing like AI really come into play in development cycles, and you're going to start seeing assets that are just straight up AI generated because it doesn't take as much time to pick a couple examples from a GPT prompt. Now implementation wise, service wise, like that's going to be different, but I think you're going to start seeing a lot of things that are going to make people uncomfortable, both from a developer and artist standpoint.
What's going to be interesting on that note is that AI on the positive side could end up leading to the more smaller teams as opposed to these giant monolith companies. We talk about like why these bigger games are really struggling, and it's like you have so much overhead. Imagine trying to move 9,000 people in a direction and just the extra management and time that has now taken to get these assets and these things done, when all of a sudden, if that can be completely automated, then you might see, and my hope, in terms of somebody who's just overly positive or hopeful, for future things, is that we see the return of that small man team. And I'm excited. That's why one of the things that Lighting a Fire, when they announced the size of their team, I was like, oh, this means it's going to have a real strong identity in terms of its vision and it's what it wants to accomplish. And yeah, they're doing some procedural generation. It's not that AI has to come in and generate all the art assets, but it can be a very helpful tool that reduces cost, and more than cost, reduces management overhead. I think when I complain about various different systems in the real world today, I always look at it, it's like you've got way too much administration and not enough workers. And you have administration that then has to try and justify their jobs, which just takes time and resources, and you're just doing pointless busy work. And then you burn out the people who are passionate and wanting to actually bring that thing out into the market.
Yeah. Just look at Starfield. When that developer that released the article was explaining, the producer was explaining, it wasn't Todd, it was someone else, but they were explaining the troubles that they actually had to undergo with Starfield. Usually they're used to a team with around 150, maybe 160 people. I mean, Doom was made with like 70 people. When it went to Starfield, they had over 500 people that they had to coordinate with, and like 3 or 4 different studios were all chipping in with different parts. And instead of it being a situation where they could go to, with like a Doom, they could just speak to the person to their right and get what they needed done or get the information. Once they introduced machine games and stuff like that, they had to contact the lead over there, who would then filter it through to their team. They would wait for a response. It would go back to them. That all adds overheads and delays to your project. And that's why Starfield actually took a little while to come out. It would, if it was a smaller team that made it, or all in-house, and wasn't being split over like 7 different studios, you would have seen it, the cost of it going down, and the actual release time. But as games get bigger, it's a problem.
And to that, like even let's talk about 343. And every time something has come out about Halo Infinite, it has pointed back to there was problems in like management, and there was a lot of churn with contractors, and there was a lot of things going on that ended up just frustrating all of us who just wanted to enjoy Halo. And then when we played it, we were just like, what is this? You know, and not that it was a bad game, but it definitely felt like more of a template that they built out eventually into like a sandbox that you could have fun in. And I'm just talking about the single player. I think the multiplayer, it is what it is. There are a lot of missteps there, but I think the teams themselves have voiced their concerns. You know,
I just want to play ranked Slayer,
right?
Like I don't. Well, that's a crazy
I wanted split screen co-op. Me and my wife have enjoyed every single Halo game together, and we were
4
pumped.
was when that went away, right?
I actually
five was. Yeah,
but they committed that they were going to bring it back for Infinite. They publicly said, all right, guys, thank you. We're not going to do that again. And then it's weird because there's been hacks or mods that allow for it. So the core framework is there, but for some reason they're just like,
oh, they straight up said we're just not gonna spend development resources on this, even though it's something everybody wanted.
They also said it was working. They got it working, but it wasn't stable.
Right.
When you went too far apart from each other, it wasn't stable enough to remember where you are, and it would just drag one of you to the other side.
And that's a fair
too far.
Right. Just like Halo 1 prevented you from going too far. It would just warp you to your teammate when one of you went to a checkpoint. Like there's solutions there. It just sounded like they weren't going to spend any more time and money building out a feature that they promised. But then I think it wasn't a developer decision, and it wasn't even like a lead decision. I think that was a management decision going, hey, no, we've got to get these skins and packs out for the seasons, and we got to hurry and get like the seasons built out for multiplayer. So don't spend any more time building out a feature that may or may not work, you know.
As someone who's worked in the games industry and worked for some of the big AA companies at least, I can tell you when it comes to developers, all they want to do is make a good game and make a game that actually works and is happy. It's usually the suits that come down and say, all right, that feature sounds really, really cool. We really like it. Now, how much is it going to cost?